Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome. Get in at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Those are the phone numbers you can dial up. Can also tweet at us at Hail Varsity Radio, at HVarsity Radio is where you can tweet. And also watch the show, ESPN Lincoln's Twitter handle and Facebook. And chime in live, as always, on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Can get in touch with us at Schmidt_radio, at Herbel Essence for Elijah Herbel, and Connor Clark is at C_Clark_27.
And Schmitty, I want to start the day off here with an apology, not to cut you off, but I somehow missed the quarter zip memo. I'm not sure what's going on here. You got a full zip, I guess. But
yeah, this is a jacket.
From your camera, it looks like a quarter zip. I know Connor's got the quarter zip on. I completely missed the memo, so sorry about that. I pulled out the old hoodie today.
You just keep doing your rainbow hoodie.
It's San Francisco. There it is. Brought to me by a roommate after his trip to San Francisco.
That's very kind of him. I've never had a roommate bring me anything except empties.
You need to get better roommates.
That's what they said. So we'll recap the bludgeoning that was. It rained in L.A. and it poured on TCU. That was a nightmare last night, but hey, some of us said a win and cover by Georgia. Boy, was I right. In the first half, that thing was handled. Mitch Sherman, good to be with us. We'll chat with Mitch in about 20 minutes, get his take on things. The perspective of where Georgia ranks, the recency versus reality of their 2-year run. Really good column by Bill Conley of ESPN. And there's a handful of squads that have gone and done the 2-year run thing. And Nebraska's obviously up there with 94, 95. Where do they rank in that run? I know where the state thinks they rank, or many Nebraska fans think they rank. But what's Bill Conley think? In hour 2, Andy Markowski will get us set up for Nebraska-Illinois. Big one for Nebraska basketball. Coach Hoiberg and company trying to protect home court. We'll hear a little bit from Fred as well. And pretty open. The show's pretty open. If you want to participate and chime in, Dion chimes in. Sounds like the latest news is Harbaugh is set to be the Broncos head coach. Elijah, are you a yaying or naying that?
I wouldn't be opposed. I personally was on the Sean Payton bandwagon.
There's absolutely no way Sean Payton goes within 1,000 feet of that Denver situation.
You say that, but the Walmart family's got money.
That's fine. They don't have draft picks.
They got money.
They don't have draft picks. And Sean
might lose his sanity while he's there too.
Yeah,
Sean Payton, name your number, name your years. You can come be the Denver Broncos head coach.
You can't put a price on misery.
Is that misery though?
It is.
If they're offering him somewhere in the range of $15 million a year.
He's already made it. I mean, quite frankly, with these coaches, it's about opportunity and winning and ego and championship and reckoning. Okay? That's what it is. You can only burn so many millions. I mean, you move beyond money at some point. And Sean Payton's a guy that I don't know that him and Russell Wilson would be a great fit.
You say that at some point you move past money, but then you look at the live golfers. We thought they'd move past money. It was about the prestige. It's about winning the Masters. Well, no, it's not. Whenever you get enough money, eventually those dollar signs flash in your eye and you say, this is not wealth for me, my wife, and my kids. This is wealth for my grandkids, for my great-grandkids, and you can stow it away. And at some point, I'm not saying that Sean Payton to Denver makes the most sense for Sean Payton, but the Broncos could have made it happen. I 100% believe that. I firmly believe that. Even though New Orleans wanted a first-round pick, okay, give away your first-round pick this year. Don't have any draft picks this year anyway. Tank next year. Go try to get Caleb Williams in 2 years and give Sean Payton Caleb Williams. There's something you can do.
Go sign a free agent.
Sean Payton,
go sign a free agent.
With all that being said, I know when you get the college football playoff, I will say I wouldn't be 100% opposed to Harbaugh, but I don't quite understand the move for Harbaugh. Everyone wants to be NFL. Everyone wants to be NFL. I get
he's
that.
over. The move for Harbaugh is to get out of the NIL transfer deal. That's it. People are running for the hills from college football.
You talk about the cap hell and the draft pick hell that the Broncos are in.
But it's still not NIL, and it's still not the Ohio State deal. It's still not what 18-year-old is going to take his ball and go home. The NFL is Harbaugh scratched the itch where he's been able to return Michigan to dominance and prominence. Now he needs to go back to the NFL theoretically and go capture that Super Bowl because he got San Fran to a Super Bowl. They were right on the door there. Indy, as crazy as that owner is, he's familiar with him. He's played for him. He got him to an AFC championship. So, now, to your point with Denver, money is incredible. Don't get me wrong. But quite honestly, Sean's pretty particular with his quarterback. The Saints have a say in where he goes because of their situation. And what are you going to be able to draft and build? You can go get free agents. I get it. But as far as building through the draft, that's what has been Denver. When they've been good, they've done well. With drafting, they've done well defensively. Terrell Davis comes to mind with where they were at with the offensive line way back in the day and having the Hall of Famer of Elway. So it's a situation where I just don't think the fit is there or the interest. There's probably better options. Would Carolina be a better option? I know they don't have a quarterback situation either, but they at least have picks.
Well, I just want to say here, for our listeners at home, can you tell we're already over the national championship game from last night? We haven't even started our conversation. We're talking other things.
Take a drink. We have not started with college football, right?
Well, there's the Harbaugh connection back to college football there, and what it does to the Big Ten should he leave.
Yeah, well, and Ryan Day, as soon as he can get out and go to the NFL, I think that's the next move for a lot of high-level college coaches. Kirby Smart is the exception because he can still run his program with an iron fist. And he has just got a pool of dudes that come play. They are reloading right now. And how often do we talk, fellas, about needing to groom somebody to step in on the line of scrimmage? Georgia's, second line change on the defensive line, the freshman named Bear that eats lots of things, they're incredible. And they just reloaded from 8 lost draft picks a year ago. They got a 400-year-old quarterback. They got a great run game, got a great tight end. It looked great, and it was enhanced because of who they were playing. I think Georgia's really good. I think this Georgia team could beat a lot of historical teams on a given night. I just don't think that it's going to, well, it's clearly, it's going to go down as one of the worst teams to make a championship game ever. I mean, this is, you hate to say it about TCU because, they earned their way to the championship game, but when it came to playing and matching toe-to-toe, Connor, it is straight up apples and oranges with the caliber of athlete and the depth of what you have. And that's...
I feel like
That's what you
could
have.
tell TCU was nervous, I think, especially on that first. They start off with a false start, and I know both teams did, but Georgia recovered extremely well from the false start. And it took a couple of drives for TCU to get on the board, and then after that, I'm going to be honest, guys, the Bulls were on, so I kind of turned that game off at halftime.
Oh, totally.
Just to watch them lose, too. But yeah, it was just a manslaughter. I did not expect it to be that bad. My prediction from yesterday looks terrible. But
we
you got to give
that
Georgia a
tape.
lot of credit. Those guys are just a bunch of dudes, and it is crazy.
Yeah, and Dion makes a good point here on the stream. You've gone from Bama to now the problem of Georgia. With the fact that they were knocking on the door, they've enjoyed the taste of said beer, right? Will Ferrell, once it hits your lips, it tastes so good. They are, with their schedule next year, they're going to be knocking on the door of the three-peat. For this Georgia team to supplant, for me, what Nebraska's done, they're going to have to do what's not been done, and that's win 3 in a row.
Well, it's funny how 5 years ago we were talking about the Alabama dominance. Man, I wish Alabama wasn't so dominant. Now it's Georgia?
Now it's just shifted because it's half of Bama because they all got out of jail from Camp Saban, and they started their own program. 7 years under Saban, and then more years under him at LSU.
And it's a dynasty in terms of this 2-year run. I know we're going to get here a little bit later in the show, but where it ranks in college football, it's up there. It's at least top 3, if not number 1 in terms of, and that could be my recency bias slipping in here, but in terms of the greatest 2-year run in college football history, Georgia was just about perfect.
They
dropped 1.
They weren't perfect, but they were just about perfect.
They were, a field goal away?
Well, they got a rematch against Bama.
Yeah. Well, what'd they lose that first game to Bama by? It was a tight game.
It was probably within 7 to 10 points. But then they got them and drilled them last year in the championship game. So I think what and it's not Georgia's fault, but what deters this crowning of Georgia from a historical standpoint for me is who they beat. Not their fault, but it's a reality. TCU, in hindsight, got the gift of their life against Michigan. Michigan helped with that. It's like Michigan had money on TCU when you look back at the pick sixes and fumbles and all of that. The national title game
at the 2-yard line.
Yeah, right. The national title game really was Ohio State and Georgia this season. If you want to go back to the teams that were even, because it was not even last night from a talent standpoint and a depth standpoint, it was Ohio State. You can maybe talk a little bit about Alabama, Georgia, and then Clemson, not quite what they were, but those are your 4 squads. Those are your 4 squads that look like each other from an athleticism and a depth standpoint, and dudes that are just freak athletes. Everywhere else, there's a gap, and that gap showed up in the tune of 65-7.
Yeah, and when you look at that scoreline, it's reflective of how the game looked. The only way TCU was able to move that ball was that one drive where Georgia had a bust in coverage. And
big time bust.
I mean, everything Brad Edwards said yesterday whenever we talked to him on the show rang true. Everything he said.
He's like, yeah, this isn't going to be very good.
He said it's the biggest gap in competition we've seen since Alabama and Notre Dame. Well, it was actually bigger from what I saw last night, that talent gap, much bigger.
This was Nebraska-Miami. Bad gap-wise.
TCU 100% unable to do anything with their defense to slow down Georgia whatsoever. 6 drives in the first half for Georgia and 6 scoring drives, 5 touchdowns, 1 field goal. I think the only 3 and out they got was the first possession of the second half.
Quarter.
And I apologize because I did flip over to Food Network at the start of the fourth quarter.
We all checked out.
It was terrible. I mean, on one hand, it was disappointing that the season ended that way, but on the other hand, you got to give credit to Georgia just with what a juggernaut that Kirby Smart has built, what we're talking about. And they got more coming. It's just a reload since. As you mentioned, it feels like the 2 deep everywhere. Their entire team is going to be off to the NFL and is going to be longtime NFL guys. That's what it feels like with this Georgia team. It feels like we're going to turn on Sunday Night Football in 5 years, and everyone's going to be, whatever their name is, Georgia.
You've got
Georgia.
the recruiting prowess of Kirby Smart that's been an engine under Saban with just going after that 5-star talent, but developing the 5-star talent like they're 3-star, and then just loading up on the lines of scrimmage. Who's with us on the
Dave
horn?
on the line.
Dave, thanks for calling in. Thanks for hanging on. Go ahead. Dave, are you with us? Dave, call back. Apparently you got
tired of us blabbing away.
Yeah, I'll get to your calls sooner. You can email Chris@HailVarsity.com. It is going to be a scary situation with where it is. Now, good story by Andy Staples with what is around the corner, and that is the college football playoff expanding to 12. And if you kind of reseed these things, you're going to have you'll still have blowouts. Super Bowl has had blowouts. National championship games, there are blowouts. But hopefully you can weed out the haves and the have-nots. And if a team like TCU gets to a championship game, they're going to be built to win a championship game, not just happy to be there because they got help and upset a team like Michigan. And I think Michigan gets drilled last night if they're playing. The only team that, from a talent standpoint, that could hang with what Georgia has and go after their weakness, which was typically their secondary this year, was Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Dave back with us?
Yes.
Dave, thanks for calling back. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. That game was ugly with a capital UG. I turned out like about, 5 minutes into the third quarter because I didn't see a comeback coming. But I'm wondering, why is Michigan ranked ahead of Ohio State in the final poll?
Because they beat them head to head.
Ohio State was the only team that gave Georgia a run for their money in the postseason.
I go with the head-to-head, Dave, and that head-to-head says Michigan smoked Ohio State. That's why they're ranked at the final poll ahead of them.
I will give some.
And if we're going to go with
Michigan was in a conference championship game. I mean, I can't forget that part. I mean, obviously that matters as much as anything, but the fact that Michigan was playing for a conference championship and Ohio State wasn't also helps that number 2 versus number 4, whatever debate that you want to have between those two teams.
I do think it's funny. There were a couple AP voters that put Michigan as number 2 in their poll this year, despite the fact they lost to TCU, and I give credit to those AP voters for being right. Yeah, they may have lost TCU head-to-head, but they gifted that game. Michigan was better than TCU, and we all saw it last night.
It was so bad. I mean, it was great drama last weekend, but you had to pay the piper, and you did last night. And I was sitting with our old friend Bill Dolman, and he's like, someone better check the tall buildings in L.A. so all the ABC and ESPN executives aren't trying to parachute without a parachute. We'll hear from Mitch Sherman, his take on where Georgia ranks. Andy Markowski, Husker basketball, coming up to next hour.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. We say hi to Mitch Sherman with The Athletic and Mitch Sherman on Twitter. Mitch, how you doing?
Chris, I'm good. How are you?
We're good. We're doing fine. We're a little sad college football's over, but probably not as sad as TCU fans still, 12, 15 hours later. There may not be enough $19 Modelo to get through that beatdown last night.
Yeah, I don't know that we want college football to go on for another week or two after what we saw last night. I wouldn't say it's a fitting end because it's not a fitting end of the season, but at the end of that, Georgia put the rest of the nation out of its misery.
It was just a boat race, and the build up to this was the little engine that could, and the TCU, and despite their recruiting base, the 3-star developmental program versus Georgia and all their 4-star and 5-star, and it wasn't a fair fight. But Mitch, you've seen a lot of college football. Where do you put this Georgia team historically with what they've done? Do they wow you in that same breath as, okay, Vince Young's Texas squad, some of the Nebraska squads, the Miami team? I mean, they've got the title right now for largest margin of victory.
Yeah, those three that you mentioned, I mean, the Nebraska dynasty, the 01 Miami team, the 05 Texas team, those are all in my conversation. We sometimes fall victim to the recency bias, yes. And people will talk about 2018 Clemson and 2019 LSU. They were both 15-0, and those are the only teams that finished 15-0 before last night with Georgia. The last two came out of the SEC, which I think is the toughest gauntlet to go through. As strong as Nebraska's conference schedule was in the 90s and in the 70s when the Huskers won championships. As difficult as things were for Texas to get through the Big 12 back in 05, I think most people agree that what LSU and Georgia did in these last few years is a tougher run through the thing. And then to have to go through a 2-game postseason also is something different. I don't know if I put them quite on the category of 19 LSU. Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation about that last night during the game with a coworker, and we'll see. Time, I guess, is going to tell on some of this stuff. I mean, yeah, you want to judge them entirely for what they did in college, but I think I probably think a little bit more highly of 2019 LSU, seeing Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and others. I should probably mention Jefferson first. And
you're okay. You've got choices.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, that team, especially on the offensive side. So they're in the conversation for sure. I don't think that they have at quarterback. And I mean, hey, he's great. He's amazing. I mean, he was the story of the night. I don't think I think you could put other players. I would get crucified by Georgia fans, I'm sure, for saying this. I think you can put other players in that spot, and as long as they had the right makeup, and his makeup is A+, they could also engineer that ship. But yes, that's invented. He's the man of the hour, and congrats to him. And I know he's older than half of the NFL quarterbacks, but whatever. He won it and won back to back. So he's in the same breath with Tommy Frazier and others.
Mitch Sherman with us from the Athletic, Hail Varsity Radio. Mitch, I want to talk a little bit here about Nebraska. We had a chance to see each other last Friday at the presser meeting with the coordinators, Satterfield and Coach White, and they wowed. But just overall right now, what's a good word to describe this Nebraska staff that Coach Rule's put together? What's a word? And as I add a second part to this question, just the topic of Texas, right? TCU just played for a championship. Baylor's been decent. Tech is playing good ball. Texas is supposed to be, in the playoff based on what they're spending and who they get. But how vulnerable is that state right now for Nebraska and others to go make some recruiting hay?
Well, Nebraska wants to be Texas's Big Ten team. That's the rally cry as the Husker coaches get back to Lincoln this week and head out on the road by the end of the week. You're going to see 3, maybe 4 Nebraska assistant coaches in the state of Texas on Thursday or Friday. I think it's Friday when the doors open back up for the January recruiting travel as they start to continue to work on the 2024 cycle and maybe put a couple finishing touches on 2023, depending on what happens in the portal. Nebraska got Billy Kemp, the wide receiver from Virginia, last night, which is a big addition, but he's a 1-year guy. So, you're looking to the future beyond 2023 and there's needs that may yet still be filled by a signee or two in February. Texas is, Nebraska's legitimacy in the state of Texas in the eyes of Texas high school and just the establishment of high school football and college football in the state of Texas has grown tremendously. I wouldn't say that Nebraska had a big problem. It's just that in the past, or maybe you could look at it that way, it's just that they were somewhat forgotten over the past decade. Yeah, there were players that came out of Texas to Nebraska, but Texas sends players all over the country. There are so many great prospects that come out of that state. With Matt Rule, because of his ties in Texas, and he has a protege as the head coach at Texas Tech, and Joey McGuire. He has Joey McGuire's son, soon to be announced, Garrett McGuire, on his staff, who is going to recruit in Central Texas. He's got Bob Wager, who is a legend in the state of Texas, just having recently stepped down at Arlington Martin, a power school in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He'll go in and recruit that area. I believe Terrence Knighton, the D-line coach, is going to have some work to do, an area in the state of Texas that he helps recruit along with other areas. So they are looking to be a force in recruiting in the state of Texas. And, they're not going to go head to head with Texas and Texas A&M and win a bunch of battles, but there are players there that they can find and that they will find who fit the profile that Matt Rule and the staff want to bring to Nebraska.
Mitch Sherman with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Mitch with The Athletic, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter is where you follow him. Some thoughts here as it gets closer to winter conditioning time, and Mitch mentioned the recruiting that's going to take place and ramp back up end of the week. And I want to go to Dylan Raiola. Social media was all over him, at least Nebraska fans, not in a negative way, but just noticing that, hey, Dylan's at the national title game. You have Nebraska and the family ties, of course, but Georgia's Georgia's been able to really kind of pick who they want at quarterback, Mitch, in the recruiting game. And the story of Bennett is impressive, but he wasn't necessarily, Georgia's first, second, or third choice, comparatively speaking. Let's talk about Raiola here and that race for 2024 with Nebraska being a factor in that race.
Yeah, Nebraska's definitely a factor, and the one thing about the Raiolas is they're going to travel. You're going to see the Raiolas go places, and that's been the case for Dylan, and it'll be the case for Dayton, his younger brother, as they progress through high school. Dylan's now just halfway through. No, he'll be a senior next year, so he's a little over halfway through with his academic portion of it. Probably a mid-year guy, so he's got a year left of high school. He's 3/4 of the way through, and he's been traveling to campuses, to camps since after his freshman year. They're going to continue to do that. He's moved schools. They started in the Dallas area. Now they're in Phoenix. He'll stay at Chandler for his senior year, but this is a mobile family is what I'm saying. They've been to Nebraska many, many times. Of course, they've been to all kinds of other schools. So not a surprise to see the Raiolas show up at the national championship game and to see Dylan there and taking pictures with fans. I think George is definitely a factor here. Until he signs with a school, the recruiting is a crazy game, and so we'll see. I like Nebraska's chances because of the passionate feelings that family has for the University of Nebraska. It's something you can see in their body language and all over their faces when they come to Nebraska for games and take pictures on the field and walk around in pregame. And, I'm not privy to the conversations that happen behind the scenes, but I think the coaching transition and what has happened over the past 2 months has been extremely beneficial in the end and will continue to be beneficial for Nebraska in its pursuit of Dylan Raiola. You can expect that when those doors open for recruiting again this week, that there will be a heavy presence that Nebraska sends to Chandler, Arizona, to check in on Dylan Raiola and just to be there. They're limited in the kind of contact that they can have face to face. You're not going to see home visits at this point or anything like that, but they will be there, and as will other schools, as will Georgia, as will I'm sure USC and others too. But Nebraska will be right there in the mix, and I think my suspicion is that this is going to work out well for Nebraska.
A few more minutes. Mitch Sherman joins us from The Athletic at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. Coming up here before the hour is done, another segment with Mitch as we put him on hold up against a hard break. Guys, we'll react to the Billy Kemp get for Nebraska, the wide receiver / punt returner, and what he can bring to this offense. Interesting story on Jeff Sims, Nebraska's quarterback, from a national analyst with On3. What is Jeff Sims at quarterback? Nebraska's coaches think they know, but based on his career and how it's gone at Georgia Tech, man, that ceiling's pretty high for him. And we'll also, into hour two, dive into the best 2-year runs in college football. Where does Georgia rank in reference to Nebraska 94-95? Bill Conley dives in there. Tonight, not only Nebraska basketball, but Micah Makuza is going to make his announcement, sets his commitment date, and that is, around 7. So while you're tipping one back, keep locked into Hail Varsity's Twitter handle at Hail Varsity for an update or two or three. So that's on the way. More with Mitch Sherman. Andy Markowski going to break down Nebraska-Illinois. We'll have thoughts from Fred Hoiberg. Big ball game for Nebraska basketball and plenty more college football as we continue a Tuesday. It's Hail Varsity, and we're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. A few more minutes with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, you've seen this recruiting side of things for a while. Does Coach Rule's staff remind you of any other staff in college football? I mean, I look at Kirby Smart in Georgia, and I know the vicinity of the talent is. Does Rule's staff remind you of another program out there? Are they their own unique animal when it comes to their evaluation, their ability to recruit, and then obviously just they are grinders, they're tireless at always being 2 or 3 steps ahead to be everywhere all the time?
That's a good question. It's tough. It's tough because they haven't been together long enough for me to say that I see characteristics of this program or that program. You know, that's all a piece. Those are all pieces to a bigger puzzle that I think come together after they've been on the ground in Lincoln for months, if not years. So no, I don't see I see similarities to different places, but I don't see like an entire. I can't make a comparison to from one staff and say this is like Nebraska. They're still, officially putting this thing together. We'll get an announcement this week on Wager and on Garrett McGuire and on Rob Dvorak as the linebackers coach. Those guys are in the fold now. The latter 2 of those are done with their seasons in Carolina, and they'll be announced very soon. But until then, it's still officially just 7 assistant coaches and Matt Rule and his support staff, the administrative side. So they're still working on this. You asked me, and I went in a different direction minutes ago about how I would describe the staff, and this maybe helps to answer this question you're asking right now. And they haven't had time to go in a different direction, although I've seen it. I've seen it go in a different direction. So they have had time. Right now, I see a very functional, and that's maybe not the most complimentary word. It's not. I mean it in a way of complimenting them, because so often at Nebraska and in previous regimes, and I'm not just talking about the Scott Frost years, so often at Nebraska, there has been dysfunction that has bogged things down. And so far with this group, what I see is efficiency, function, common sense, running the organization. Excellent at communication from the head coach on down through other areas of the staff, in the way that they communicate with the recruits. They're going to get even better at that as they have more time to branch out. But that's what I observe here as we're 6 or 7 weeks into this thing.
Mitch Sherman with us, Sale Varsity Radio. Mitch with The Athletic, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. Mitch, will wrap up and ask you the question that The Athletic put out this morning on Twitter. And would you rather lose in a blowout, or would you rather lose a heartbreaker?
I think I'd rather lose a heartbreaker. It's going to hurt more in the end. But if I'm TCU and I wake up this morning, I'd rather go down 35-34 than 65-7. That's a fairly easy one to answer.
I'm with you. I paused when I saw it and I read it, and I'm like, that pain feels like forever if you lose a nail biter, but then you've seen it work from a motivational standpoint at a very, very high level. Specifically, you look at what Nebraska turned the '94 Orange Bowl into, just from an example here. And then, but listen, he went into 2002, I should say, post Miami's drubbing of you, and it just it went bad to worse. So I do think it's easier, or it makes more sense to be able to find great motivation and build on a close loss than it does to build on something. It's hard to build off of last night if you're TCU. It didn't ruin their season by any means, but that's one that you kind of have to just forget. Yeah, you just walk away from and just never to be referenced again, right? Mitch Sherman with us from The Athletic. Mitch, we'll talk again next week. Always appreciate checking in with you. Thanks for the time today.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks to Mitch Sherman, an extended chat with him. on Hail Varsity Radio, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. As Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark, we get back at it. Was that me?
It's fixed now. We got it.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm not sure where Connor just went, though. Connor has disappeared.
Connor threw his computer out the window. So we ended with Mitch asking, is it better to get blown out or lose a heartbreaker? And while those heartbreak losses can absolutely eat away at you and tear away at you, I'm going to echo what I just said. That pain can be turned into fuel. And with the blowout loss, specifically in TCU's case, TCU woke up this morning and just said, what the hell just ran us over? And while there'll be a new team, a different team next year with the same goal, get back to the playoff, win a conference title, what can you learn other than, man, from a staff standpoint, we better recruit better?
Well,
easier said than done.
Or do they wake up and wonder how they squandered such a season? And I don't want to say it ruins their season, but whenever you look back in 10 years, you're going to look back at this game, and you're not going to remember, oh man, TCU had a great year that year. They beat Oklahoma real bad. They went to the Big 12 championship game and lost to Kansas State. But you're going to remember that they got absolutely steamrolled by Georgia in the championship game.
In historical fashion.
In historical fashion. That's what you're going to remember from TCU. And while it's nice to say, you know what, this doesn't take away from the season that they had, it kind of does.
Sure.
It kind of takes away from the season
It's
they
the
had
last impression.
No one is going to remember any of the regular season games from this TCU squad, unless you're a TCU fan. Some of them are going to remember the moments, but what you're going to look back on and say, man, that TCU team didn't deserve to get into that championship game despite the fact they beat Michigan, and they were beat in historic fashion by the best team in the country, Georgia. You're going to remember TCU as the doormat.
You're going to remember TCU as a team that just got flat out embarrassed. Mm-hmm. And to bring this back to a Nebraska angle, Nebraska, what do you remember about 2001? Both of you guys remember probably zero. But from a Nebraska fan base standpoint, yeah, it was kind of funny to get in over Colorado for the championship game, the Rose Bowl game. But you remember how that season ended. Not the fact that Eric Crouch helped will a team to be in position. They weren't a bad team, right? They were top four good. They belonged playing Illinois in the Sugar Bowl or Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. They probably didn't belong playing, be my guest, Oregon, Colorado, whoever in the 2001 year of college football. You go play that Miami team and see if you can still walk after the game.
And that kind of gets to my point is, Nebraska fans are going to remember moments from that 2001 season, yes.
Yeah.
But the overarching college football...
The final two. Games.
The average fan from around the country is going to look back at that season and go, yeah, man, Nebraska got steamrolled by Miami. What did Nebraska do that year? Because everyone remembers Miami. And that's what it's going to be with TCU as well.
Yeah, that's on the gravestone for this season is, hey, great year. You lived dangerously and won a lot of ball games, but you got pummeled when it mattered.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out, winding down this first hour. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. 10 minutes away, Andy Markowski going to be with us. His thoughts on Nebraska-Illinois tonight. And where does Nebraska rank versus Georgia when it comes to the best two-year stretches in college football? ESPN's college football insider and historian Bill Conley weighs in on the best two-year stretches in college football. We'll debate that around 5:25. Open phones next hour as well. And email from Matt earlier in the show asked about a comment I made earlier and the talent gap between TCU and Georgia last night was obvious with the margin of victory. There's some guys that are good ball players. There's some guys that'll go play in the NFL from TCU. Same with Georgia. Georgia is going to have more of them. And from a depth standpoint, it was highlighted on the broadcast where the line change with the three down linemen, that two of them are true freshmen that come in and just keep wailing away on the interior of that TCU offensive line. I haven't seen the gap in talent since I go back to that that Rose Bowl game because that's what last night reminded me of, was the Rose Bowl, Miami v. Nebraska. Just Nebraska had a good team, had really good players. Crouch won a Heisman, but it was just a different animal with Ed Reed and Willis McGahee and Sean Taylor, and go down the list of that historic roster that Miami had. It was a knife and a gunfight, is what it was back in the Rose Bowl, and that's what it was last night with Georgia versus TCU.
Yeah, when you say Georgia's the more talented team across the board, it doesn't necessarily mean that all 22 starters are better than all TCU's 22 starters whenever you line them up like for like. But when you say across the board, it's pretty damn close. It's 19, 20 guys that Georgia put on the field last night, they're starters. You would put across the guy from TCU across them, you'd say, you know what? Georgia wins this one. Almost all the way across the board. The exceptions being maybe Max Duggan over Stetson Bennett. That one seemed like a wash last night. Based on the season that they had, I'd take Max Duggan, but then based on what I saw last night, I'd take Stetson Bennett. And quarterback gets helped out by the talent around him, so I think you have to take that into account with Stetson Bennett.
And then you go with Stetson. And Max is incredible. Great career, lots of perseverance, very talented dude. And you flip-flop him. And I think you probably you trade helmets, you're going to get a similar result. You just do. I mean, if Max would have had some of the options and weapons, and specifically the defense that Georgia had on TCU, then Max Duggan's in a much better spot versus running for his life every play.
Or at least give him Brock Bowers as a safety net. I mean, Brock Bowers, based on what I've seen this season and last night, would probably walk into the NFL and be a top 10 tight end right now. I've seen some people say top 3. That's a little far for me, just because there is the gap between the NFL and college. But that dude would be a top tight end now if he were to go off. And he still has a year of college he has to complete.
He does. And you look at the tight end class. I mean, Bowers right there, and it tells you what the analysts think of Thomas Fidone, because Fidone ranked in front of Bowers, as Nebraska fans anxious to see Fidone stay healthy and get on the field. We'll spend some time with Andy Markowski, more college football thoughts. It's hour 2. It's on the way with Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back with you. It's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Connor Clark is back. Connor, have you found a hard wire?
I haven't, but I think I found a good spot. It took a couple of chances, but we're good to go. We're on the main level, so we're not in the bunker anymore, and we should be good to go for the rest of the show.
Take us through what seemed to be medieval torture devices you were using during the break. I saw them. You had them on camera for just a second, and it looked to me to be torture devices.
I was not watching this.
Well, it was a phone tripod, which I actually just got in my stocking.
Kind of looks like a nipple clamp.
For a couple minutes there. But
I was thinking the same thing.
Doesn't it?
I wasn't going to say it.
Maybe I should just stay disconnected at this point.
Poor Connor.
Poor Andy just sitting backstage
Andy
waiting.
Markowski's just like, I'm hanging up. Never ever to answer the phone call again. Let's welcome in the pride of
I got
all.
on the wrong show.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Well, you're on the phone. Someday we'll get you on camera, Andy, and you can see Connor's devices that are in his subterranean Chicago home. How are you, Andy? What do you know?
Yeah, doing well. Great start to the new year, and big game at PBA tonight.
It is. It is an absolute, need to win, and this is the second one in a row for Nebraska basketball. And I want to start off with your thought process, emotions. Andy Markowski, Husker basketball standout with us. with the Minnesota game? Were you confident, or were you like, was there a cloud of doubt about Nebraska?
Well, it's from the football to the men's basketball side, we've been a little snake bit, right? So I think the whole fan base, when that corner three went into forced overtime, you're just thinking, here we go again. But even the start of the game, I thought, defensively we didn't have a lot of energy. Minnesota was making a lot of shots, but we were able to score, which, made me feel like, okay, like, at least we're finding baskets against Minnesota to stay attached. And, I thought the second half, we settled in and, should have put the game away in regulation. Didn't happen, but you got to credit the group that they had the tough-mindedness to stay the course. And any road win, regardless if Minnesota is 14, any road win is proved with the women with losing at Rutgers. It's just hard to win on the road in the Big Ten, and the men, give them credit. They got to win.
Andy Markowski's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. And Andy, whenever you look ahead to tonight, did that Minnesota game, did that give you encouragement for this Husker basketball team moving forward, in the fact that, that they went and got a win on a hostile venue on the road whenever things didn't always go their way? Or does it make you a little bit nervous that Nebraska struggled with a team that, frankly put, is not going to finish in the top half of the Big Ten, is probably going to be a basement dweller in the Big Ten in Minnesota?
No, it's kind of what I thought it would be, right? I mean, Vegas had a small favorite. Minnesota just played Wisconsin, really tough. So, it's not like Minnesota has been blown out by Big Ten teams. I mean, I feel like they've been competitive, especially after Christmas. It's on paper. I thought we were more talented than Minnesota. Obviously, Battle is a terrific player. We had proven that we can beat, good teams at home, to go on the road and see it, transfer into a win. I felt it was a positive. So, even though they're a lower half team, you got to protect your home court. You got to find a few wins on the road. And so far they're kind of holding serve, with the NIT being the ceiling. So if they can still come more road wins and, win a game like Illinois tonight, then I think the NIT is still a possibility for the group.
Andy, what's your take on Illinois coming into this game tonight? Because they lost Sky Clark right after their loss to Northwestern, but then they come back at home and arguably play their best game of the year in conference. So what do you make of the Illini coming into this game? What have they done in the transfer portal that you like, and how do they stand here tonight?
Well, I think, obviously there was some smoke signals coming out of there over the last month that, maybe the leadership and the continuity of the group wasn't aligning as fast as Brad wanted it to. Sometimes in transfer portal you can add talent, but sometimes it doesn't blend. Look at Nebraska last year. I thought there was times that we were really talented, but the pieces didn't fit. I think Illinois is a case of that. I think when they make shots like they did the other night, I think their energy level is good. I think they defend. I think they play more together as a team. When things start to break apart and you're missing shots, and I don't know if they're team chemistry and that group hasn't been together. I think Shannon is a terrific player that they added, but yet isn't maybe being as consistent as what they've had in years past at the guard spot, and certainly losing the size they lost last year along the front line has left a little void. So I think Illinois is a dangerous team. I think they're talented. I think Nebraska's togetherness and toughness and the fact that we are connected on the defensive end, should allow us to win tonight.
It's Andy Markowski with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Andy, you mentioned the fact that Illinois lost some size along their front line, and that's where I want to go, because they got a guy in Coleman Hawkins who really, to me, reminds me of almost an Isaiah Roby type. Very athletic, 6'10". The NBA teams, the NBA scouts have been watching him all season long. The difference between him and Roby is it seems like his jumper is a little bit more developed and maybe a little less willing to go down amongst the trees and do the dirty work down low. What's your take on a guy like that and how Nebraska will be able to defend them? Is that a guy that Nebraska wants to have coming against them as the big man, or is that something that you think is a little bit scary for this Husker basketball team with what he brings?
Yeah, I think Gary is a really good match there. I think Gary's going to bring some physicality, and even if they slide him to the 5, I think Walker's pretty mobile. So I'm comfortable with that match. But you kind of described it. They went from probably being one of the most physical teams in the Big Ten a year ago. Just half court man to man. Almost them and Michigan State kind of had that mantra of being the toughest teams, loose ball, 50-50 balls, and this group, they just have not played to that level of physicality, and I like the matchup. Really it comes down for us to, taking care of the basketball. They're going to get into Greisel a little bit, and if he can handle it, if he can get us into offense, and then if we can make some open threes, I think Wilhelm has really helped us. He's came in and allowed us to stretch at another spot. I think he's 2 out of his last 4 or 5 threes. So that is what they need him to do, be able to shoot it from another spot outside of just their 2 guard with Wilcher and Tominaga. But defensively, I think we can guard them. I mean, Shannon's a terrific player. He's capable of going to get 20, but I think our wing matchups are good. I like our 4 matchup. I think it's it's a game that on paper, if we can get off to a good start. I think Fred said that the other day. I mean, Illinois still has some question marks about how good they are. So if we get off to a good start, make them play from behind. PBA is a tough place to play. It should be a fun night.
Andy, when UCLA's been on it and they hung 79 against Wisconsin, Northwestern's proving to be not a slouch, so more and more teams in league have lost to Northwestern, even though it's a rivalry. They've won at Texas. They beat UCLA early this year and had tight games against Maryland and just a 9-point loss to Virginia. When Illinois won, and tonight's going to be a tough environment for them, what's been the reason? What is their identity with Illinois when it comes to some of these signature wins they've had, but also wins that Vegas says they should be able to go eke out on the road? They're minus 4.5 tonight.
Yeah, I've not watched all those games, but just looking at some box scores, when they've shot it, they've played with a better energy. They've been able to handle some of that adversity. When they haven't shot it is where they've really struggled from a leadership standpoint. They've had some scoring droughts. So, Nebraska's going to have to do a good job. Michigan State, shot it well, and then Minnesota got off to a good start. So, we have to make sure that we're defending. We're helping a lot, but we're athletic enough to kind of extra cover the backside, run people off the 3-point line. So, I think if they make 8, 9 threes to our 2 or 3 threes, we're going to have a hard time tonight. But if we could make 5 or 6 or 7, which is kind of our ceiling as a 3-point shooting team, but keep them in that same range, I think that gives us our best chance to win. And when they have shot it well, they've played harder, and I think Brad has made comments on that their energy and effort is not consistent, and when that happens, you win some big games and then lose some that maybe you should have won.
Andy Markowski is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Tonight, Derek Walker obviously going to be a big factor for the Huskers, as he has been ever since returning from his illness at the beginning of the year. What does his stat line need to look like tonight in order for the Huskers to come out on top?
Yeah, the same. I think his assist total is what I look at. The games that he has to have 8, 9 assists are trying to run offense is a little scary for us. That means our guards aren't able to create, or maybe Sam's not able to take advantage of his point guard matchup. So I like Derek kind of in that 12 to 14 point range with 7 or 8 rebounds and kind of 4 or 5 assists. If we're having to constantly get him the basketball in the middle of the floor to create shots for other for our shooters and our wing players, that's not a great recipe. I think Minnesota, they liked his matchup, but he also had 8 or 9 assists because our guards really weren't doing a lot to create offense. So, as much as I'd love to see him get a triple-double, if he's getting upward in assists, that means Fred's been way too dependent on him being the focal point of distributing in the offense. And, I think he's better as a scorer and a rebounder and let the guards make some plays as well.
Andy, that leads into my next thought, and that is who's the wingman tonight against Minnesota. Nebraska had pretty balanced scoring with Walker taking over in overtime. Who else, along with Walker, needs to get it done tonight? I know there's some obvious names, but who are you confident in tonight?
Yeah, well, good question. I love Vandemel. He's a tough kid. I think for this team to get to the NIT, he's got to start scoring more. He gets out in transition and finds a layup, but some of those pull-ups and threes, I think he's capable of making. Wilcher and Tominaga just struggle getting their own shot. I think Vandemel is capable of going to get a basket, but he's going to have his hands full. I think Shannon is a great two-way player. So, it comes back to Wilcher and Tominaga as being, they're kind of 1-for-1 at that two guard. They've got to make, open shots when they get the opportunity because, Gary is in that 8-to-8 range, and then Wilhelm is providing him a little bit of offense. So, kind of a long-winded answer, Chris, but I think Vandemel really needs to be a 12 to 14-point scorer for this team to grow and have a chance to win games like tonight or go on the road and beat teams in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten.
Andy Markowski's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Andy, let's flip it over to the women here with the last about 2 minutes we have left. And they got a tough stretch upcoming. 3 of their next 5 coming against opponents ranked in the top 25. But they started off tomorrow night with Penn State, a game that I don't want to call it winnable, but I think the Huskers should go into this one feeling confident.
Well, after I was lucky enough to not have great internet coverage driving out to Columbus to have the Pius game on Saturday, but having to watch that game on tape delay, I don't know if any game is going to be easy for the group. They're not playing very well since Widener went out. They're trying to find their way. I know they had a chance to win at Indiana, so they're capable of getting some of this fixed. But new roles are sometimes hard to do in the middle of the season. But Penn State has improved. To your point, it's at home. I think we're kind of dropping down on the bubble or an area that you don't want to be. So this is a game they need to win, and then they have number 3 Ohio State coming in here on Saturday, which I think is 18-0 and been one of the top teams in the country. So it's a huge week for them. Certainly, they need to right the ship on Wednesday and have a chance to get a huge win on Saturday with a top 5 opponent at PBA.
Andy, about 30 seconds. The Pius girls tip it off Thursday against Southeast.
Yeah, just Southeast is much improved. They beat Lincoln Northeast the other night, so Lincoln basketball is very healthy. I think all Lincoln teams are competitive. Class A, I think Christian has a good group. So yeah, nothing easy in Class A. We're 9-1. Certainly having Southeast at home is a game that is important to our kids, and it's a game that we need to win if we want to keep wild card points high, so you get a chance to host the district, which is so key in Class A.
Andy Markowski with us, Pride of Ord, Husker standout at Markowski_Andy on Twitter. Andy, enjoy the ball game tonight. Thanks for your time as always, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
There he is, Andy Markowski with us on Hail Varsity. Good breakdown in Nebraska-Illinois. Some good insight on the matchup tonight. Open phones till 6 for you. We'll dive into that historical question, Nebraska v. Georgia, when it comes to a 2-year run in college football. Hail Varsity continues.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks to Andy Markowski. Podcast is up from Mitch Sherman and also Andy Markowski. That'll be ready for you. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. You can do the whole show or different segments of the show at your convenience. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Hail Varsity Radio. Also the full show and video on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Open phone still 6 here at 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Let me ask you this. Are you insulted when you hear this Georgia team being considered the greatest of all time? And in reference and in context, it's a 2-year run. That's our parameter. That's the question. It's out there, ESPN.com. Bill Conley, totally respect him and his work, and he's pretty forthright with what he thinks and how much he respects Nebraska. So it's not a clickbait, let's start a forest fire on Twitter, but Nebraska 95 has been trending the last 20 hours. And Nebraska fans, to your credit, you are going to the wall, to the mattresses, however you want to term it, to defend Nebraska's run. History is important. It's not been a great decade for Nebraska, a little less than a decade. But when it comes to historical significance and a place in history on that Mount Rushmore of college football moments, teams, programs, reckoning, it is very hard to convince, flip, argue with, and win against a Nebraska fan on that 94-95 run. The 10 best 2-year runs, the way it's outlined, you have Barry Switzer, and Barry's talked a lot about those two of his 3 national championship teams. What's unique about these Sooner teams is they were on probation, right? They were in NCAA jail. They didn't get to go to a bowl game, but they still were crowned champions or won a share of one. And they claimed one title, but they went 21-0-1 and then 22-1. Just fabulous. They were great. Now, they were not eligible to go play in an Orange Bowl against a Notre Dame or against a USC who was tied to the Rose Bowl. You have USC, their 04-05 season. Their 05 team absolutely annihilated Oklahoma in similar fashion to what Georgia did against TCU. In similar fashion what Miami did to Nebraska in 01, similar fashion to what Nebraska did to Florida. 24-1, those SC teams, your only loss was the Vince Young game in that Rose Bowl. Who's on the horn?
We got Paul and Lincoln on the line with us.
Paul, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Remind me, Schmitty, Georgia last year, what's the record? How'd they do?
They won the title. They lost a game. I know 0 is greater than 1 when it comes to 2-year run. Nebraska went 25-0.
Yeah, I think you got to take that into account. I mean, honestly, I would not want to have my Huskers. I am probably the most diehard Husker fan you have ever met. Heck, I wrote a children's book about the Huskers. I'm doing all sorts of things that are Husker-related. I love them, been there so many games, but it just kills me to have to say that I would not want to have seen the 94 or even the 95 Huskers play that Georgia team last night. They looked almost unstoppable on either side of the ball.
They look great. They are loaded. They're talented. They're deep. They're physical. Don't disagree at all with you. What I can't do is accurately transport eras. I can't transport 2022, 2023 to 1995. I just can't do it because guys are bigger, stronger, faster every 5 to 10 years.
And
now,
I guess I'd have to take part of that back, what I said. I think I actually would love to have seen 95 Huskers versus 2022 Georgia, because I think it would have been a hell of a game.
That'd have been fun. It'd have been a lot of fun. And there are things that Georgia has and can do that might make you sweat a little bit, and there's things that 95 Nebraska, theoretically, if you can go apples to apples, could do and would do, that would make Georgia sweat. I mean, we don't know how Georgia'd handle a ground and pound. Now, they come out of the SEC, and it's physical, so I get it, but can you stop Frazier in the option? Can Nebraska's pass rush...
of the play-by-play man, how many tackles can one man break?
That's a good impression, actually.
That was pretty good. Yeah, old Jim Nance. Jim Nance wanted to wander in traffic after halftime of that ball game. Little known fact, Paul, thanks for the phone call. Bill Cosby was doing the honorary coin flip at that Fiesta Bowl.
I did not know that.
That's all right.
But I like your point about you can't transport through the years because
it's hard to do it when you got Georgia's tight end. How
Brock
big
Bowers.
is Brock Bowers? Is how big?
6'5", somewhere in the 250 range.
Okay, 6'5", 250. Okay, I think Grant told me he probably played defensive end as a sophomore that year for Nebraska. True sophomore. He might have been 245, 250, 6'5", 6'6". So that's a fair comp, a defensive end versus a tight end.
But the counterpoint is, whenever I look at Georgia's secondary last night, do I see any of them tackling Tommy Frazier with success? Probably not. So it comes down to Nebraska's offensive line.
Can Georgia stop the option?
I mean, there's mismatches on both sides for both teams here, and it's because you're trying to go play a football team that was around 25 years ago. But I mean, in terms of mismatches, I don't know. Sure, I see anybody beating that 2019 LSU team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson offensively. I mean, I think you have to separate the team a little bit from whenever you're talking about a 2-year run.
I think you got to look at what they did during their run, and what sticks out to me is Nebraska. You're not going to convince me that Nebraska's task in '94, the '95 Orange Bowl, wasn't the toughest assignment. To go win in Miami at night. Period. Mm-hmm. Against Warren Sapp, against Trey Lewis, against a slew of NFL guys. And it's not just go win in the Orange Bowl at night. It's go win in the Orange Bowl at night at a place that's giving you PTSD for the last 5 years, 5 bowl games, decade, quite frankly. That's the icing. The fact they're unbeaten is the math. The fact that they went and beat that Miami team and then followed up and annihilated a Florida team that went on to win the national championship team a year later, win a national championship a year later. And Nebraska's victories and margin of victory against ranked teams, against 4 top 10 teams, against a really good era of Colorado football, taking down your Sunshine State champion in Florida or Miami. That's the kicker. I know I'm from here. I know I've grown up going and watching and covering, but that to me is your differentiator. I know that Georgia beat LSU, in the conference championship game. I know they survived Ohio State, and God love you for doing it because that's a good Ohio State team. I know they thrashed Oregon to start the year. They still didn't get to face Bama this year, though, did they?
No.
They didn't play Alabama. Mm-mm. So, and that's not their fault. It's just part of the math I'm doing here.
They won't play Alabama next year either.
No, I know. Michigan and Georgia got a cakewalk into it. Guys, that's where I'm at with this. I can't accurately take yesterday and get in the DeLorean and go back. I can tell you what I think, and I think a ground and pound rush option offense is a pain in the ass for anybody to stop in any era. And I think the depth in pass rush and just the mentality is a different beast that those teams that existed had, and that's your difference. That's your difference. That's where those are the 2 legs I stand on with Nebraska football against many or any argument.
I mean, can we at least agree here, though, that what we've seen in the past 2 years from Georgia is the closest we've seen to that run of dominance, 94, 95 from Nebraska in terms of a 2-year window? Alabama had the 2011, 2010.
2011, 2012.
2011, 2012, back-to-back. They did, I think you could make the comparison. I think Georgia's the most dominant. In terms of how dominantly they handled college football the past 2 years, I think it's the closest that we've seen since 94, 95 Nebraska.
And you can't, and I hate saying this, but Miami's teams 2000 to 2001, 2001 to 2002, they're bulletproof. They are incredible. That's the game I'd love to see is 95 Nebraska versus 01 Miami. Give me that. Who's on the horn?
We got Chris on the line.
Chris, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Hey guys, great show. Schmidt, you made some comments earlier that made me think, and Georgia bringing in their freshmen and their freshmen just dominating. If you watched the playoffs the last 5 years, you see that quite a bit. These awesome teams that go to the playoffs and even dominate and win national championships, they play their freshmen.
They have freshmen that they trust playing. I think that's the difference. And you have a handful of freshmen that are given key snaps and big snaps, but they're ready for it.
Now, last year, Henderson for Ohio State, and
big time running back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's Clemson's had wide receivers that got quite a bit of playing time as freshmen. And we don't do that at Nebraska very much anymore.
I'm not talking
about your rank and file 2- and 3-star guys.
You don't have the same
dude. When a 4-star, 5-star guy goes someplace, they don't want to. If they see that previously 4-star, 5-star guys just sat on their butts, they're not going to be excited to go there.
Well, I think you also have to look at the guys around these freshmen that these high-level
You don't have the
have.
Same level of guy.
Well, it's
in
like
Nebraska, you haven't for the last 7 years.
If you throw in a freshman into the secondary at Georgia, there's going to be 4- and 5-year guys around them.
Receivers that just get lost.
Dude, they may be on paper. They may be 4-star.
Tyshawn Lindsey has been playing great for Oregon State for 9 years now. I mean, he had a heck of a year this year. He's throwing touchdown passes.
That's great, but you still got to do what you're told and do what you're asked to do, and you don't always get that because of your retention issue.
And it should also be noted that
who was better than Tyshawn Lindsey?
Well, his freshman year, his freshman year,
he didn't do a damn thing except fumble the football on kick returns.
You have to look at some guys are 4 and 5 stars because of potential, and some are 4 and 5 stars because of who they are. And typically, whenever you're the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world, you can pick up the 4 and 5 stars that are 4 and 5 stars because they're ready now. And other
they're
guys
not missing on their 4 and 5 stars.
That's a great point. And then whenever they throw them in, they throw them in with guys that are 4 and 5 year starters in the SEC. That if the freshman makes a mistake, the 4 and 5 year starter next to him can go and clean some
Chris,
things up.
Thanks for the phone call, bud. Appreciate you dialing up. I don't discount him saying, let's play the young studs, but you've got to have your young studs ready to go. They've got to be up to par, and then the situation's got to be right. We got a hard break. We'll take more of your calls. We'll continue this discussion. Connor wants your thoughts. Also wants your thoughts at 466-3776 at Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Hail Varsity presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Get to more of your calls here with ESPN Bill Conley. The best 2-year stretch, he has Nebraska 94. 95 ranked number 2 behind Georgia. Georgia 2021, 2022. Recency bias, or does he have a point? You youngins are like, dude, old man, pump your brakes with this 94-95 worship. I get it. I can listen. It's just hard to... it's hard for me to unwrap my arms around those two teams, that era, what they did, and the fact they went 25-0. Now, I won't doubt that there's insane talent, athleticism, options, different, bigger, faster dudes 28 years later. It is what it is in that aspect of talent and just what you are needing to put on a football field now.
I think the real argument that you can make for Georgia is the fact that, right or wrong, it's going to go down that the SEC in 2021 and 2022 is better than the Big 12 was in 94 and 95. The road to get to the college football playoff was more difficult for Georgia.
The road to win a title is different. You're playing a conference title game and 2 games.
But like for like, I think I can look at Georgia's schedule this year and say, you know what, that was on par, if not better than Nebraska's schedule in 95, the second year of each. Because what really
the
SEC
the tie, West was good.
The SEC was difficult.
Big 8 was really good in 95.
Georgia, people forget, they started the year with Oregon and absolutely beat the brakes off of Oregon. Oregon ended up being a pretty good football team this year. Now
3 losses.
It was week 1 or week 0. Can't remember which for that Oregon team. And they had a lot of development they still needed to do within their program. But I can look at that and I can say, you know what? Georgia's path to the college football playoff was probably a little bit more difficult than Nebraska's path to postseason play back in 94, 95. But that's not taking away from what Nebraska had to go through. Nebraska still went through multiple top 10 teams both of those years.
And mauled them. And
mauled them.
And the other part of it, too, is Florida's a hell of a lot better runner-up than TCU. Pete's with us on Hail Varsity. Pete, go ahead.
How you doing?
Good, man. What do you say?
Well, I don't know so much on that. It's hard to compare. I will say this, for the championship, if you go back and look at Nebraska teams that they played for national championship, there was a heck of a lot more NFL caliber players on the opposing side. TCU last night just totally got out-coached, unprepared, and made Georgia look that much better.
You think they got out-coached, or did they just get out?
Oh, I think Georgia out-schemed them.
You know,
It's easy to out-scheme whenever you also have a talent.
I mean, yeah, you can call whatever the hell you want. I mean, the playbook was open, Pete, wasn't it?
That quarterback for TCU had a really poor game. He didn't know what he was seeing out there. I don't think TCU. They had a lot of time to prepare for Michigan. They didn't have much time to prepare for Georgia. And if you look at TCU, I don't think they have a whole lot of NFL talent on that team compared to Georgia. I think it was kind of a mismatch in talent-wise and being prepared, I guess, in my opinion. I think Nebraska, when they won national championships, if you look at the opposing teams, there was an awful lot of NFL caliber players we went against.
No, totally agree with that. Pete, thanks for the phone call and weighing in on this. Connor, you're a college football guy, and both of you two young pups that don't have any gray in your hair just get to watch YouTube about the mid-'90s. Sideburns, gel chains, hypercolor shirts, Tommy Hilfiger, and yes, Nebraska football. LSU, Georgia, even the Texas or SC teams, are they a conversation or an adversary to these Georgia teams?
If you're talking 2-year runs, no, and sorry, Connor, I should have jumped in here, but in terms of best college football team ever, I think that 2019 LSU team's got a real good argument for this one thing offensively. And it was only 1 year, but...
It was only 1 year, but when you look at the offense that LSU team had and what it's doing now in the NFL, it's bonkers. And just that talent all around is unreal. To go to the comparison between this Georgia 2-year run and Nebraska's 2-year run, I think you could make a pretty strong argument on paper that Nebraska may have the upper hand. And what does it for me is that Georgia didn't win 2 conference titles in a row. And I think people, obviously they won both national championships, which is the ultimate prize. But Nebraska was able to, not lose a game in that 2-year stretch. They won both conference titles. They beat X amount of top 3 teams in that run. And they won both of the national championships. Now, again, you guys said it earlier, Georgia's road to the championship a little bit longer and a little bit tougher. I think if you stuck both teams on the field right now, I think Georgia would probably win. But I think you could give Nebraska a pretty good argument on paper that they have the best 2-year run in college football. Well, it's very, very close.
If you take any team pre-2000 and put them up against Georgia, that 95 Nebraska team's probably got the best shot of taking down Georgia of any team pre-2000, right? I mean, I don't think that's crazy to say.
No. I need to just reach out, and we'll talk to Babbers tomorrow, Mike Babcock, get his take on it, because Babbers knows the history, and can we scoop up and drop in?
Well, I know Babbers will give a good argument for that 70-71 Nebraska.
Sure.
The back-to-back stretch there. And I know he went to Twitter on that today and said he thinks that's still the best 2-year run ever. So
Matt chimes in here, and listen, I don't know where he comes up with some of this stuff, but I don't recall like a payroll or LSU's 2019 team.
I remember the only real investigation being whenever Odell went and tossed hundreds at the team following the national championship.
Yeah, that was Odell. Yeah, Beckham Jr.
Yeah, Odell Beckham. Whenever
I don't have any.
And then he claimed it was Monopoly money or fake money.
I have zero idea. Zero idea what he's talking about here. With a defensive tackle that's getting the several $100 handshake at LSU. No idea.
That doesn't ring a bell.
No, it doesn't. We will investigate.
I'm sure you meant to say wide receiver, because there are 2 of them that could have had 6 figures.
But one of them was 4-star, almost a 5-star that needed to learn how to play like it, and the other was a 3-star, Jamar Chase, that Mickey brought in. Dennis is going to weigh in. We're not talking about the path. We're talking about the team. That's the differences in now versus then with just what you required to do. Well, you had to play an extra game at a playoff. If you're Georgia, you also didn't have to play a conference championship game because you didn't win the. Remind me here. Did Georgia lost? They lost in the SEC champion. They had to play a conference championship game. They lost and then got to rematch, right, with Bama a year ago.
Correct.
So it didn't knock them out. You lost your conference title game, you get knocked out. 96 Nebraska, they don't screw up against Texas, is playing for a third straight. So there's that. Brian is wondering about Chris's phone call. Who's the delusional caller talking about 4- and 5-star recruits? Someone call the institution.
Well, no, I don't think we should call him delusional because it is fair to look across the college football landscape and say, why are their freshmen getting significant snaps at these other places and it's not happening at Nebraska? And I think it comes down to A, recruiting misses, and B, the talent that you have on the field around the freshmen. If Nebraska has talent on the field, I think you'd feel more comfortable
You
putting
absolutely can drop them in.
Yeah.
But what's the level of talent? How college ready are they? And that's just it.
I mean, we had a guy in Ernest Hausman this year go make significant plays
Big
for
time.
Nebraska. That's
And
the
he was
vision.
playing.
A guy that, as the season goes on, gets better and gets a bigger role.
Hail Varsity winds down next.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff today. Get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Fun debate and sound quasi-civil discussion here on 94-95 Nebraska v. Georgia. And appreciate your input and phone calls. Interesting with Matt's email. He reminded me that with instant replay, Nebraska does have 3 championships in a row. The 93 Florida State game, the 94 Orange Bowl with the fumbles and the clips and all of that. Then presumably you still beat Miami in Miami, and then you beat Florida. So you have your Florida sweep.
Well, we'll see if Georgia can do it because they got an easy path to the college football playoff. And I don't want to say back-to-back-to-back is a shoo-in, but with that schedule, they're well on their way to another college football playoff next season. I think you can already pencil that one in as being one of your 4 teams.
Well, we'll finally get Georgia-Michigan, assuming Harbaugh doesn't head off to Donkey Land.
We'll see about that.
But you want to talk about Kirby Smart and being a master motivator? This was out on Barstool. It has been edited so we keep our jobs.
And I'm just wondering, what does Nebraska do in 94-95 with a pregame speech like this?
Trust your preparation. Your ass is prepared for this for 365 days. I think about the in that locker room. Think about getting our opportunity. All the you went through this week to get ready for this game. Now is when you pay the price. You go out there with energy, enthusiasm. Hey, now, ain't nobody in this room should be cautious. Ain't nobody in this room should be nervous about Go out here and their ass up. Don't think about scoreboard. Don't think about You think about knocking the out of them. Did you hear what Box said on Monday? When I sat in that meeting, I wanted to go play right then. Tore your up out here. Pride and joy tells me you these guys up. You go play the right way. You play the right way. You knock their off. You stay off the ground. You tackle the man with the ball. That easy. Look at the right punish their on offense and kick their on special teams, guys. It's about who the we are. I believe in you. Let's go.
Take a knee and let's pray. that's like the scene in Happy Gilmore is what it was.
That was like Scarface. How many you can fit in there in 60 seconds?
Joe Pesci had 76 in a 2-minute and 13-second stint in Casino.
This is giving it a run for its money.
Reminder to get buckled up. Seatbelt saves lives and prevents injuries only if properly worn. Buckle up, a message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Fellas, we smiling around 10 o'clock tonight if you like Nebraska basketball. Illinois -4.5.
I personally, if I was a betting man, and there's no stake in a beer on the line tonight because you and I swept that last night over Connor. So Connor, I think, owes us both a stake in a beer.
Connor's going to stay in Chicago. Having Wi-Fi issue.
Connor, if you want to go double or nothing, I guess we can open up tonight. Nebraska money line. Honestly, Nebraska to win this one straight up. Give me the Huskers 71, Illinois 67.
What's the bump money line? What does it do for you? Odd-wise. Last night, if you took TCU, and they would have won and with the upset, the money line was 4-1, the buyout.
I believe... Let's do some quick math in my head here. I think this would be 1.5 to 1.
Okay.
I think
Illinois does it. and I just think they're too physical. It's not that Nebraska is bad or not a team you can root for. I just don't think. I think Illinois may have righted the ship in the right time, and they'll figure it out. Their guard play is going to be the difference. Give me the Illini 72-65. Connor, real quick.
Huskers 65-60. Let's go home happy.
Look at that. Tomorrow at 4. Talk to you then on Hail Varsity.